Hello and welcome back to the Thought Leader Recruiter podcast. I'm Sam Bylett and today I'm joined by Adam Jennings, Account Director at Ad Some Zest. Adam, welcome to the show.
Thanks very much, Sam. Thanks for having me.
It's great to have you here, Adam. Obviously, you mentioned before we talked, Zest's sweet spot is helping to scale software vendors. Could you just take us back to the beginning and what inspired you to launch the business during the 2022 tech boom?
Yeah, for sure. Adam, been in tech sales recruitment or commercial hiring within the tech space, shall we say, for the last 8 and a bit years. So spent 6 years at a larger firm, more established business that had been around for sort of 20 years or so, kind of cutting my teeth from, first or second jobber in recruitment, but very green. 6 years there, ended up being kind of principal consultant, won top biller award on 1 year and a few other sort of good accolades during that period. So all just got to the point where probably it just felt like there was something more to be done. So essentially me and two other guys from from Robertson Sumner pivoted over and created Zest back end of 2022. I suppose the tech boom post-COVID was a big boom for 21 and 22. We obviously started at the end of 22 and then obviously there actually was a bit of a downturn in 23 and 24. So, but yeah, the reason was purely just, 6 years in a business, got to a probably point where kind of hit a ceiling, wasn't really progressing and developing, and an opportunity arose to kind of do something new and obviously work for ourselves rather than obviously versus a bigger firm. So that was the reason for
Yeah, nice. And what kind of companies do you typically come to Zest? Are you mostly working with kind of early stage SaaS startups, Series A to C firms?
Yeah, look, I think my background, we've covered a mix of kind of that startup, scale up sort of organization, and also worked with some of the biggest, tech firms globally. One of my biggest customers for many years was part of the SAP group, right? So obviously, completely other end of the spectrum. Working at Zest now probably shows the times as well. Like, the last couple of years, the bigger firms, the big tech companies probably weren't hiring as much, probably were restructuring and redundancies versus kind of mass growth. And equally, they all have big internal talent teams. So the last couple of years, definitely our sweet spot is probably more that pre-seed, Series A, Series B, Series C. They might not have a talent function. They might not have a huge HR function. They might not have a little brand. So that's probably where we can plug in and just add the most value to these customers, right? So really kind of be a trusted partner of these businesses and really add the most value as possible.
Yeah, for sure. I saw a stat the other day saying 61% of tech CEOs list finding enterprise sellers as their number one growth blocker. Are you seeing a shortage show up in your work?
I think, look, any of all these big SaaS companies, right? And when we're looking at enterprise AE, right? Everyone's going to be looking for these big customers to kind of sell to. And obviously the level for these, tech sales in general, it's already probably playing in the Premier League worth of salespeople, right? You're already at the top of your game. Then you're looking at kind of enterprise sellers, the top level enterprise sellers, you're really looking at those kind of finite 10 out of 10 people, right? So I think if everyone's fighting over the same people and the expectation is super high with the standards, there's always going to be a challenge. So I would say so. I think, if you find a good enterprise sales individual to come in and do new logo and bring on, I don't know, £1 million worth of ARR, most tech companies will bite your hand off for that, right? So there's definitely a competition for those individuals. And then when the struggle is even harder to find them, and equally they probably want the best people as possible, there's probably a skill gap from people that are maybe SMB to mid-market who are doing very well, but then there's a different league from true enterprise sellers who have done it for 5, 6, 7, 10 years or so, and there's obviously only a finite amount of those sort of people. So definitely it's a skill gap there, but I hope that's where people like us can plug in.
Yeah, absolutely. And when a new client kind of comes your way, what are some of the red flags that tell you they might struggle to keep up the talent that you hire for them?
Yeah, look, I think when you're profiling new customers and understanding about like their attrition or hiring or attracting talent and so on, as I say, that the last couple of years the market has been definitely more of a client market. There's been more people looking for work, more job seekers versus roles. So obviously the clients and businesses have had kind of the power in that sense. When it's kind of flipping to more of a 50-50 or more of a candidate-led market, you've got to be competitive. You've got to be competitive with your benefits, how you onboard people, how flexible you can be, your offering, your product. The main one probably, though, where I see people get frustrated and move on is salaries and OTEs. Like, again, if you follow me or any of my content, I do post a lot about kind of OTEs and salaries and targets and commission and so on. And so often you'll hear, 100 double, 200K package, whatever it might be. The reality is you speak to these reps 4 or 5 months in and, no one's even close to these numbers. The commission isn't there, the targets have been raised, and the kind of deal sizes are too long. So there's always an attrition around that. And then also you look at the tech space, right? It's constantly evolving. It's constantly new tech are out there. New vendors are popping up every single day, right? So if you're not kind of keeping up with these demands and there's something else that is doing that, they can easily kind of pull strings and pull people out of you if you're not looking after the people you've got and when you're bringing new people in.
Yeah, absolutely makes sense. And yeah, you once said, I think it's fulfillment separates a good client from a bad one. If you could get every founder or hiring exec to understand one thing about working with recruiters, what would it be?
Yeah, I think, I think everyone has worked with a recruiter in the past, right? Some people have good things to say about them. Some people think they're a pain in the arse service and they don't actually add much value, right? So it all depends on who you've worked with and so on. So I think it's very much case by case. If I was designing a client or someone was working with me, I think working together is a massive part, right? They might be the client. We're obviously delivering them a service. Some people, the service is just sending a CV and making introductions as quick as possible, as close to the brief. Other people want to really work together, talk about attraction, talk about onboarding, have tips about interviews, really kind of build a partnership. So it very much depends case by case. But I think the clients that we work with, if we can kind of design them, everyone we work with is on a retained basis to start with, right? So we're not looking for people we can just trade CVs with and kind of just see what sticks. Much more about proper relationships, building partnerships, and hopefully delivering as much value as possible. So that kind of collaboration, working with the customer, a realistic expectation, and look, we'll come to an outcome. Everyone wants a 10 out of 10 outcome, right? They want the best person as quickly as possible, who can hit the ground running, etc., etc. The reality is finding these people can take time. There might be compromises from both sides. So I think having that relationship and genuinely adding value and saying what's realistic and what's not will be a key part of that. And obviously delivering to expectations, but making sure that expectation is actually realistic from both parties.
Yeah, for sure. And when a candidate isn't getting offers, where do you usually start? Is it tweaking their CV? Is it helping them refine their story, or shifting how they're actually approaching the market?
I think if you're talking about getting offers, it's very different about getting interviews. So I think if you're saying they're not getting interviews, they're not getting traction, you look at the kind of input. So, okay, what's their LinkedIn profile like? How they're applying for jobs? What's their CV like? What's their methods and so on? Like that's all about getting into the funnel and getting into the conversations. That's one problem for a lot of people. If you're talking about not getting offers, that's obviously, let's say they're getting to final stages, second stages or whatever. You can reverse engineer that back and say, well, where are you interviewing? What sort of role was it and so on? Like how close was it to your background? You might have made it through to the final because you're, got a solid background, you can articulate yourself and you've got some good numbers, but the reality is they were looking for X and you're Y. There's going to be someone probably closer to X. So like it's very different depending on the problem. I think if you're looking at the offers point of view, if they're interviewing for jobs they have, have a background in, have done before, have a track record, and they're not getting offers, that's probably either a skill gap potentially on maybe how they're articulating certain things, how they're working through the process. Like there's little touches that you can kind of do throughout the process that demonstrate your sales skills, whether that be kind of creative follow-ups, speaking to the account executives or salespeople within the business, getting referrals in. All of this sort of stuff paints a picture about how you'll do the job in real life. Yeah, I suppose if it's the problem of offers or interviews, they're quite different. But that's probably where I would start in terms of the offers part.
Yeah. Great advice. And coming from a sales background yourself, do you think recruiters should be actively selling their candidates to clients, or has that approach kind of gone out of style a bit now?
Look, in sales recruitment, I think it still definitely is a part of it, right? Depending on the organization you're dealing with. If you're looking for a 30K, relatively early on individual to come in there and maybe hit the phones and create some noise, there's definitely a part that you could call a client and be like, I've spoken to someone, they're not maybe bang on. They could be a fresh graduate. They could be doing something else, wanting to transition. There's certainly a level of influence you can put on a deal and obviously maybe hopefully get someone an interview or maybe get someone a role. There's definitely a part of selling there. I think the reality is when you're dealing with an enterprise account executive for a global software vendor and they're paneling to 3 or 4 senior decision makers and it's a complicated process, it's quite hard to influence of that over the line at the end. That, you know, there's a part of selling, but probably the main part will be probably consulting, I'd say, at that point. You know, understanding they've got to the final stage, they maybe haven't landed the role. This is the feedback why. Okay, well, let's digest that a little bit and let's kind of break it down. So the feedback is they're not right for this, and reason. Okay, the other three candidates you've also met, they potentially might not be right for this, or this reason as well. So what's the kind of must-have? What's the must-have? What's the stuff that we can maybe be flexible and so on? Because are we going to find this individual? Do you want to go back to the drawing board? You know, this could take another sort of 2, 3, 4 months before you got someone in seat. So again, I think selling people in to get a job is different depending on the level. I think you can sell someone in to get an opportunity or get an interview is also different as well. So it depends on which part you're talking about, the selling part of it, Sam.
Yeah, okay, makes sense. And one thing I hear a lot, companies assume their brand or track record should be enough to attract great talent. And in your experience, are they usually missing something there?
I think, again, it goes back to what market we're in, right? And who they are. If you're Microsoft, actually, Microsoft have just made loads of redundancies, right? So it's probably a bad example. But if you're someone that is super well known and genuinely has got a good brand and a good product that people are talking about, and as soon as they get a message from this company or they get a cold call from this company, they straight away know who they are, right? There's probably a select few that can rely on that. That doesn't mean they can still take 2 months to interview people, give a bad process, not give any feedback, and just expect people to come queuing out. And they probably will get applications, right? But in that period, good candidates, there'll be other good firms that will move quicker, that communicate better, that can offer just as good salaries, that will get people right. So I think if you're sitting back thinking, let's just put an advert up and we'll go back in 4 weeks and we'll just have our pick of the bunch, I think that is very archaic and that won't get the best results. There's probably a fine line of being that, you know, well-known solution, but a good process that move quickly and genuinely value people's time and interview process, not making them jump through 15 hoops with no feedback, dragging it out and then giving them nothing at the end and so on. There's definitely a level of that. There's always going to be the big players, of course, that will always get applicants because they'll have the brand, they'll have the tech, and they'll have the money. But if you rely solely on that, you're not going to get the best people all the time, for sure.
I think it's just so important now, isn't it, in employer branding, especially in this day and age where everything is online, everything's visible. It's just so crucial now, without a doubt. LinkedIn data recently showed that in-office enterprise reps are hitting quota 7% more than remote ones. Where do you stand in the in-office versus kind of hybrid debate?
It's a very interesting debate, right? Since post-COVID, right? I think before that, everything mainly was internal, right? There was most people were office-based. COVID accelerated that massively. Then you have the 21 and 22 tech boom where probably the numbers were a little bit inflated, right? Because people were working from home, but everyone was buying technology. It was a massive bubble where everyone was earning great money, everyone was selling, and it probably was quite hard to look effective in the data. You flip that to 23 and 24, where we've had the restructuring, the redundancy sort of period, and quotas have been not being hit and everything else around that. So it's definitely a pinch of salt. I think it will be case by case. I think there's definitely a room for both. You know, I personally work a hybrid model at the minute. I love spending time with the team and having that office environment because I think it brings collaboration. You get a buzz in sales of other people and so on, which, you know, isn't impossible to replicate at home. However, it's much more difficult. Saying that, in the modern day, though, with people, you know, wanting to work in environments where they feel comfortable, having that kind of work-life balance and so on can be massively important for certain individuals to have that motivation to get up and do the work while having, you know, the split of family time or personal time or whatever. So my preference would always be a hybrid, either a 2 and a 3 or a 3 and a 2. However, we do work with reps and companies that are fully remote and they are seeing success. We're also seeing a big increase of people looking to go back maybe 4, maybe even 5 days a week, right, to get that environment and to get that culture back. So my personal preference would be hybrid, and that would be the model I would suggest. But there's still an argument either side for fully remote, or I don't think 5 days a week. I think that's pretty archaic in the minute. I think 3 and 2 is a nice mix. 4 and 1 doable, but yeah, I think hybrid is definitely the best model for me, Sam.
Yeah, I think you're absolutely spot on there. I think, I think there's no kind of right or wrong here, is it? It's whatever suits the company, whatever suits the individual. I just think, you know, the companies have to be more flexible and less rigid, because it's, you know, that kind of benefits everyone. And I think, yeah, the hybrid model is the way forward for sure.
Yeah, absolutely.
And I expect you are. I mean, everyone is. But are you using any kind of AI tools to track hiring signals for role kind of reposts or SDR team shifts, or are referrals and direct outreach still your go-to?
So yeah, it's a good point. So the last 2.5 years, we've certainly dabbled in different technologies. We've used tools like Sourcewell, which is a big recruitment tool, which people might have heard of. That is a very unique kind of tool in the market that definitely has a lot of value. We've used a product called Venti AI, which is a kind of lead generation sort of tool, which is a bit more of a startup scale-up environment that kind of give you insights and data when roles are potentially going to be posted and hopefully getting ahead of the curve. For us, our biggest success so far, and out of the probably 45 customers we've probably won in the last 2.5 years, I would say 75 to 80% of them are probably referral based of some sort. Whether that's right or wrong for us, we've just lent into that. It probably leans onto the retain model to get commitment up front, to win businesses, to have money up front and all that sort of stuff in a crowded market is more challenging. So having that referral, having someone that has worked with Adam or worked with the brand or worked with someone within the business, that can certainly add a lot of weight to it versus kind of going completely cold and outreach. That being said, there's still a massive pull to do cold outreach and create new connections, right, and get into new circles. So the short answer, we utilize AI, we utilize technology where we can do, but I think the bulk of what we're doing and what we're trying to really maximize on is referrals, and we also do that via an NPS platform as well. So everyone that goes through the interview process, gets the job, whether it be successful or not successful, will get a survey at the end of it. How was your experience with Adam or Zest? And that's obviously a great way that we can kind of utilize people that we've worked with. They might not have got a job, they could be unsuccessful, but if they give you a 10 and a nice review, you can hopefully use that for someone else and maybe get referrals around that as well. So that's kind of a nice way we've done it.
Yeah, for sure. With AI, it's an interesting one in recruitment. How far do you think AI is going to go in recruitment? Are we going to see it fully automated at some point, or do you see always the human element being involved in recruitment?
I hope the human element for my sake and our sake, right?
Yeah.
And I think to deliver a better service, whether that's in recruitment or calling your bank, calling your insurance company or whatever, like AI is popping up everywhere to eliminate maybe time, cost, and save a bit of human error. I really hope it doesn't fully get replaced, and I don't think it will. Right? I think there's always going to be a place for people to be involved in some aspect. I can't imagine negotiating offers with AI. I can't imagine kind of going back and forth about certain things. However, I'm saying this now, 2 years ago, the advancement it's already making, right, it is leaps and bounds, right? So I'm hearing people that have done first stages with AI that are kind of getting asked automated questions that they just kind of filter their responses, then they get put into an ATS file and so on. So that it's definitely trickling in more within the recruitment sector, whether that be for recruiters using it to do BD or candidate outreach, or for candidates doing job searches and everything else. So hopefully, if you're not using it, it's definitely going to be part of it moving forward 100%. How much part of it is to be confirmed, but you look at the advancements they've done the last 2 years, it's definitely going to be a huge part of every sector, and recruitment is no different to that.
Yeah, it's like exciting and scary at the same time, isn't it?
Basically, yeah.
Yeah. And if you could expand Zest's client base tomorrow, what would your ideal new client look like?
So, yeah, it's a good question. Our ideal client would be probably someone who have had funding, probably circa maybe 100 headcount with no talent acquisition team of sorts. So we can really plug in and be that outsourced team, outsourced sort of people that can kind of look after their whole talent attraction side of the business. So again, any sort of tech company, we're relatively tech versatile. 1 minute we'll be working with a HR software vendor. The next one it might be kind of, I don't know, supply chain software. It's very kind of broad. But I think for us, the key things that we see is a good client had some funding into the business, have some sort of tech tool, whether that be a software as a service, cloud solution, the odd professional services business or so on, and a genuine need for potential sales, marketing, customer success, commercial hiring, and the last thing that I'll put in there that actually wants to actually add value to their recruitment business. The best clients that I've worked with are the ones that kind of listen and partner and take advice on, and might always not be the sexiest customers out in the market, right? But the ones that genuinely want to hire people, want to work with you, and we're going to get the job done between us. It's not going to be pointing fingers where it's been wrong or right or whatever it might be. We're going to be on the ball, but we ask the clients to also be on the ball and work with us, right? So yeah, small growing vendors that have a need is what our ideal ICP would look like.
Yeah, great. And what's next for Zest? Is there any exciting plans in the pipeline?
So, I mean, so we've been going for what, 2 and a bit years now, and look, I think that the plan was to probably be a bit bigger than we were headcount wise, right? We're at 5 heads at the minute. The plan was probably to be closer to 10, being realistic, but I think there's a lot of businesses, recruitment companies that are struggling to make profit, going under and potentially kind of losing staff and so on. And we've been proud to kind of keep profitable and have 2 full profitable, very good years, right? So look, what we don't want to do is do vanity growth for the sake of it. That's not what we're about. We want to stay lean and we want to stay competitive and we want to be working with our customers. I think the plan at the moment is to probably continue on at this growth. If we see any superstars that can fit the model that we could work more flexibly with, we're becoming a bit more flexible. Lizzie, one of our team, has been in Berlin for the last 9 months. And to be fair, her billings have been consistent and better than they were last year. So not correlation there to not being in London, right? But for the right people, we can be flexible. So I'd say the plan is at the minute, let's finish out 2025 strong. All indications of the market that tech seems to be getting better. Recruitment seems to be getting better. So let's finish out strong. Let's continue working on our ICP and our own offering to the customers, and just stay profitable, stay relatively lean at the minute, and then when the time's right, I'm sure growth and everything else will definitely be a part of it, Sam.
Sounds like a good plan. So for our audience, how can they find out a bit more about Zest and connect with yourself?
Yeah, so I mean, Zest, Ad Some Zest is the technical page. So if anyone wants to look it up, LinkedIn, website, and also the whole team are very active on the socials, right? So founder Callum Lyle, very active on socials. So if anyone wants to find out about anything we're doing from a client perspective, candidate perspective, whether you're in tech sales hiring or you're a candidate maybe looking for their next opportunity in sales, marketing, customer success in the UK, mainly do a lot in the European market now as well. Anyone feel free to reach out. I'm more than happy to have a chat.
Perfect. Well, thanks, Adam. It's been a great conversation. Really enjoyed it. And we'll speak to you again soon.
Cool. Cheers, Sam. Thanks very much. Thanks for having me.